Hi, and thank you for being here today. My name is Kevin Gunlock, President of the South Central Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO, labor council that consists of 100 unions who represent tens of thousands of workers coming from all walks of life. And all of these workers and all of these union leaders have been impacted this last year. Just like every year on Workers' Memorial Day, we honor the dead, but we also have to fight for the living. 50 years ago, on April 28th, chosen by the AFL-CIO in 1989 as the date to observe Workers' Memorial Day, the Occupational Safety and Health Act went into effect, promising every worker the right to a safe job. First, we're going to have an invocation from Reverend Brianna Aline, Trinity United of Trinity United Methodist Church.
Let us pray. Loving Creator, we gather together in community to honor those who've been lost to COVID. God, we mourn with those who mourn, honoring them in their grief and praying that you surround all who have died in this past year in love. God, we know this pandemic has not hit our communities evenly. We know that there are some communities that have borne the brunt of this disease. We cry out at the injustices that this pandemic has revealed and the injustices that this pandemic has exacerbated. Holy One, we pray for peace in our communities. We pray that this moment be a wake-up call that moves us to work for justice, a wake-up call that pushes us to celebrate the dignity and create safety for all people and all workers. We pray for those who continue to be affected. There are so many who struggle with lasting health concerns, so many who are working in unsafe conditions, so many who wonder about how to put food on their dinner tables. God, we lift up these people to you. And God, we pray that you move us. Move us so that we may continue to show up in the love that you model. Move us so that we may continue to work for justice. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. As I mentioned, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, it was a law that was won in 1970 because of the tireless efforts of the labor movement and the allies, who drew major attention to work-related deaths, disease, and injuries, organized for safer working conditions, and demanded action from their government. We have someone here from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, Chad Greenwood, Madison Area Director. Chad.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. Every year on April 28th, we commemorate Workers' Memorial Day, where we remember and honor all working men who have lost their lives on the job. We mourn not only those we've lost, but for those they've left behind, their families, their co-workers, and their communities. I recently had the opportunity to talk to a father who had lost his son on the job, and his son was 27 years old. He had his own wife, his own family, and that was 8 years ago, and that loss still stings for that family. Many of these tragic losses were entirely preventable if safety standards had been followed, proper controls were in place, or if better safety and health management systems were made a priority. Today, as we remember and mourn those who have lost their lives on the job, we also commemorate 50 years since OSHA opened its doors. Workplaces are much safer today, but we still have a lot of work to do. It's hard to believe that 51 years ago, workers did not have that same protection as they do today. As the pandemic has highlighted, OSHA's mission maybe is more important now than it ever has been in those 50 years. More than 500,000 people in this country have died from COVID-19. Essential workers, many of whom are color and immigrants, have put their lives on the line during this pandemic. We know that many workers are at increased risk, sometimes because of the jobs they do, but also because of factors like the color of their skin, their ethnicity, or the fact that maybe they don't speak English as their first language. And too often these workers do not feel comfortable bringing safety and health to the forefront. So we must ensure that every worker is trained in a language they understand. When employers listen to their employees, we know that these workers understand their rights and have without fear of retaliation, and workplace deaths, injuries, and illnesses can be prevented. There's a lot of work OSHA has to do to reaffirm that commitment to worker safety and health and establish trust in advocating for workers, including those most vulnerable. This starts with us focusing our mission of protecting all workers, and we need to make sure worker safety and health, including employers and employees, get the assistance they need. Ultimately, we have to improve compliance with the OSHA Act, which is necessary, but we also have to keep making progress to continue that dream that one day events like this will be a distant memory, that one day every preventable workplace death will be prevented. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Next, we're going to show a video statement from U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, who's been an advocate for workers' rights as well as for worker safety.
Thank you, Kevin, and the entire leadership team of the South Central Federation of Labor for giving me the opportunity to observe Workers' Memorial Day with you and honor our injured and fallen working men and women. I'm sorry I could not be there in person with you, but I'm glad to have a chance to be with you nonetheless. Your commitment to keeping America moving forward during these devastating times has been a driving force in my laws that protect a worker's right to join a union and bargain for higher wages and better benefits. There is no question that Wisconsin workers are the best in the world, but too often the dignity of their work is not respected or rewarded. That is why I hope we will take this Workers' Memorial Day not only to remember those we lost, but to honor their lives with action. Thank you for the tremendous sacrifices that you have made.
Thanks, Senator Baldwin. We know that construction workers have some of the most dangerous jobs, and we see that reflected every Workers' Memorial Day when we read off the names of the deceased. Infrastructure is going to be very important, even more so than ever before. And it's the unions through the trades that make sure, through their apprenticeship programs, through their mentoring, and through their safety training, that those workers will make it home to their loved ones. Today we have Jacqueline Weitzel, who is the Executive Director of the Building and Construction Trades Council of South Central Wisconsin. Jack.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting the building trades of South Central Wisconsin to honor the lives of Wisconsin workers today. This year's observance comes as we are in the middle of a safety and health crisis. Not only are hundreds of working people dying each day as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, often due to exposure at work, and now more than ever, the safety and health of workers is top of mind here in Wisconsin and around the world. The week of April 28th is traditionally when Workers' Memorial Day is commemorated in Wisconsin. Last year, in-person events in Madison and throughout the state had to be canceled as a circumstance of the pandemic. After a long and unusual year, those who suffered workplace injuries, illness, and fatality must not be forgotten. This year, with our health in mind and a successful rollout of vaccinations in our state, we can gather here in 2021 to honor the lives of our working brothers, sisters, friends, and families. A memorial is a reminder that not only must we honor those who lost their lives in the line of duty, we must recommit to doing everything possible to prevent workplace injuries and deaths. We must recommit to sending every person that arrives at a job site home to their loved ones and those they care for. That commitment must come in the form of regulation, government intervention, and a commitment from employers to value the lives of their workers in all aspects of their lives. We must advance these commitments and protections, and the strongest way to preserve that right will be through the passage of the PRO Act, which is a mechanism that allows workers to have a say when it comes to their health and holds accountable potential obstacles or threats at the workplace. Safety doesn't happen once, it's perpetual. When we preserve that value, we can protect and save more lives. We have lost too many people in this last year. Let us not forget. Let us take a moment of silence to honor their legacy, their families, and to wish them calm and peace. The 40,000 brothers and sisters of the Wisconsin Building Trades Council shares our most heartfelt condolences to all the families and friends who we've lost this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Next, we have another video statement from Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, another person, obviously, who cares about workers and making sure they make it home to their loved ones.
Hey everyone, I am Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, and I am so honored to be able to join you today virtually to recognize the victims of workplace injury, illness, and death. Now, 50 years ago on April 28th, the Occupational Safety and Health Act was enacted, which, along with the Mine Safety and Health Act, won protections that were much needed to make workplaces safer and also to save countless lives. But we know that these victories didn't just happen. It wasn't until the labor movement drew attention to the many work-related injuries and deaths that action was finally taken. And unfortunately, each year, thousands of workers are still killed and millions more, they suffer injury or illness because of their jobs, because of their need to provide and make a living. In our country, far too many workers are dying from preventable hazards or even getting sick from exposure to toxic chemicals. Now, especially after what we've seen over the last year, it is incredibly clear that it is far more work for us to do to keep our workers safe and healthy in the workplace. And the pandemic highlighted just how critical many workers are to keeping our communities afloat and our economy running smoothly. And these workers deserve to feel safe when they go to work. They also deserve the opportunity to have a say-so in their workplace. And that's exactly why our budget includes provisions that will establish collective bargaining rights for state and local government frontline workers so that we can help provide them with the opportunity to be able to negotiate together the way it should be. It's exactly why we need to pass the PRO Act at the federal level. Now, going to work shouldn't be a detriment to our health or our livelihoods. So, on this 50th anniversary of OSHA, and recognizing its passing, and on Workers' Memorial Day, let's all honor those that we've lost to workplace injury, workplace illness, and let's all pledge to keep fighting for the promise of safe jobs and a healthy environment for all of our working people. Thanks so much for having me. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thanks, Lieutenant Governor Barnes. I would just like to add, as a former public sector worker before I was elected to this job, we used to bargain over safety committees, not just for workers, but for the general public. That was stripped away from all those public sector workers. It was about wages and benefits, but it was also to make sure that our communities were safe and our workplaces were safe. So thank you again for bringing that up. Next, we have Carlos Gennard, Assistant Manager of the Chicago and Midwest Regional Joint Board of Workers United. I'd just like to say he represents service sector workers who are on the front line as well, that are really sometimes, I would say, are the forgotten workers that are out there, that are everywhere in our industry, that are so critical to make sure things are working, but also to make sure things are safe, especially in this last year during COVID. Carlos?
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you everyone for being here to commemorate the lives of those who we have lost in their jobs. 50 years ago, OSHA was established. The reality is that unions have been fighting for a lot longer than 50 years, and that is why there would be no OSHA without the hard work of unions. You see, a lot of the good things that have happened in our nation are a product of the sweat and tears of union members. Social Security, unions. Child labor laws, unions. Minimum wage, unions. 8-hour days, unions. One of my favorites, the weekend, unions. And the reason why we're here, health and safety, also unions. Let's face it, none of the things I just mentioned would have happened if it wasn't for the hard work of the millions of union members that came before me. Sidney Hillman, one of my union's first presidents and someone instrumental in the creation of the CIO, once said, "We want a better America, an America that will give its citizens, first of all, a higher and higher standard of living so that no child will cry for food in the midst of plenty. We want to have an America where the inventions of science will be at the disposal of every American family, not merely for the few that can afford them. An America that will have no sense of insecurity and which will make it possible for all groups, regardless of race, creed, or color, to live in friendship, to be real neighbors. An America that will carry its great mission of helping other countries to help themselves, thinking not in terms of exploitation, but of creating plenty abroad so we could all enjoy it here in America. End of quote. The America that we in the labor movement want, one filled with compassion and empathy, can only begin to be achieved by the passing of the PRO Act. You say all of America? That's right, all of it. After all, Social Security, child labor laws, minimum wages, 8-hour days, weekends, and health and safety at work are enjoyed by all, not just union members. Because when unions win, America wins. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. Thanks for everything that you're doing. Next, we have Mike Jones, president of Madison Teachers, Inc. We all know that the teachers care not only for their own workplace in relation to their safety, but also for all the children, our children, that are going to these schools and making sure things are safe for them as well. Mike.
Thank you. As President-elect of Madison Teachers Incorporated, I would like to start by honoring a group of workers in the field of education who represent so many others who have lost their lives to COVID. Whether they were active or retired, students or administrators, when we lose someone in the school community, it is an indelible ripple across our entire space. Such is the joy and such is the burden of being in such a community. As part of that, we must continue to fight like hell for the living, because if a worker at Milwaukee Washington High School wants a better space, a more safer space, they're probably not just thinking of themselves, but they're thinking of Ralph Davis, a 60-year-old man who was a coach and a paraprofessional at the high school who passed away from COVID. He is an example of the virus's outsized devastation on our communities of color, which is why we need to continue to fight. A person in Darlington, in the Darlington School District, might think of Dave Schellevold, a retired PE teacher and principal who died from COVID without having his family and friends, of which he had many, in his hospital room, unable to visit him. He is a casualty to the cruel nature of not only the virus, but of our system. Someone in Bayport High School might want to fight for better rights and protections in their space, because they are thinking of Frau Heidi Husli, such a dedicated German teacher that she was literally planning to teach over Zoom from her hospital bed before she succumbed to the virus. She is a shining example of the spirit and love educators have for our students, colleagues, and communities. And when I'm fighting in Madison, and like those at Madison East High School, we might be thinking of Isai Morocho. Although he wasn't an educator, he was my student once. And students are workers too. They work hard to make a better life for themselves and for their future, whether that's through homework or through the many jobs that they might have in the community. I, like his family, his friends, and his teachers at East High School, hold the pain of knowing the myriad of possibilities he had in his life. And he represents the pain we are enduring when those possibilities are extinguished. So when we fight for better protections, we're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for the futures of young people like Isai. As workers, we know we have to move on and to continue the work because we need to and because we want to. And our communities need to move on too. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't use this time to pause and reflect and pray for a brighter day and fight like hell for the future to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike, for all you're doing for our children and for our schools. A worker is a worker is a worker, and every worker is an essential worker. We know that. Today we have Rebecca Meyer-Ryle, Executive Director of Worker Justice Wisconsin, who really works with a lot of non-union workers and some of the most exploited workers in our communities. Rebecca.
Thank you. As Kevin said, I'm Rebecca Meyer-Ryle, and I'm the Executive Director of Worker Justice Wisconsin, which has a center where non-unionized workers come when they face things like discrimination, wage theft, and health and safety issues in the workplace. In 2020, workers opened 210 new cases with us, which was nearly double the year before. The reason for this increase, as I'm sure you can imagine, was the COVID-19 pandemic. Of those who opened cases with us, most were people of color, Latinx, and immigrants. They had no union to protect them, which made them especially vulnerable. Particularly during the spring and summer, these workers faced a lot of wage theft when their employers laid them off and then neglected to pay them their last paycheck. Given that many of them did not qualify for unemployment, this wage theft was particularly brutal. Those who remained on the job, on the other hand, faced really unsafe working conditions. I especially remember several domestic workers showing us the rags they were using for masks as their boss forced them to continue cleaning people's houses even during the stay-at-home order. We heard way too many cases of people going to work sick or going to work knowing that their coworkers were sick and would likely infect them because they had no other way to provide for their families. They endangered their lives and those of their loved ones because, ironically, it was the only way for them to survive. This Workers' Memorial Day, then, we remember all those who risked their health to put food on their tables. We mourn all those who got sick or perished because they could not afford to lose a bad job. But we also proudly stand with all those workers in our community and around the country who fought for their rights when they were touted as essential, yet treated as expendable. In the wake of what we have seen during the pandemic, we at Worker Justice Wisconsin are emboldened to build collective worker power because we have seen that the only way to ensure safety in the workplace is to speak with one voice. We also stand with our union brothers and sisters in support of the PRO Act, knowing that where unions thrive, pay and working conditions improve for all workers. We urge our national leaders to pass this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Next, we have another video statement from a proud union member who's been a union member, I'm guessing, for decades. He's been in the front line in many different contexts. I introduce to you card-carrying union member of Painters Local 802, U.S. Representative Mark Pocan.
Hi, I'm Congressman Mark Pocan, co-chair of the Congressional Labor Caucus and a proud member of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades for 30 years. 50 years ago today, the Occupational Safety and Health Act went into effect after workers organized to demand safer working conditions and better protections in the workplace. No one should die or get injured due to inadequate working conditions. If you go to work, you should fully expect to make it back home at the end of the day, healthy and alive. Yet 50 years later, the COVID-19 pandemic has made it clear that even though we've come so far, we have so much more to do. Frontline and essential workers put their lives on line daily to help our country survive this pandemic, yet too many weren't protected. That's why we need a strong Department of Labor to enforce laws that protect workers. That's why we need labor laws that put workers' lives first, not corporate profits, and demand better working conditions. That's why we need to strengthen and create new labor law that respects workers so corporations like Amazon can't union bust with impunity or treat their workers like merchandise. We need to ensure every worker has the ability to form a union just like the PRO Act says. I was proud to vote for and pass the PRO Act in the House, and now it's time for the Senate to stand up for working people and pass it too. We best protect workers' lives by making laws that protect them just like the PRO Act. I look forward to seeing it become law and take that next step forward in workers' rights. Today, let's remember all those workers who've lost their lives or been injured on the job. And let's honor them by getting new protections in place for all future workers.
Thanks, Representative Buchanan, and everything you're doing. Next, we have someone who is a nurse, a Scuffle Executive Board member, and an SEIU member who's out there on the front lines. Healthcare professionals have been our heroes this last year and always have been. I always think of nurses as the people that are there the day we're born, and sadly also the day of our passing. So here is Victoria Gutierrez with SEIU. Victoria.
Thank you, everyone. I've had the honor of participating in several Worker Memorial Day events, and this one is the most emotional, so I want to apologize ahead of time if I have to stop, catch my breath, shed a tear. My name is Victoria Gutierrez, and I'm a nurse at a local hospital, and I'm a proud union member of SEIU Healthcare Wisconsin. I am here today to recognize the sacrifices of my fellow healthcare workers in all healthcare facilities who face unsafe conditions, who have died, or who have suffered from exposure to hazards at work. I am also here to recognize the contribution of all of those in my union who have fought to keep our workplaces as safe as possible. Because we know safer workplaces for nurses and caregivers are safer for our patients always. This year has shown that every nurse should be able to form a union and to have a strong voice in the decisions that impact our lives. We must be able to advocate for ourselves so we can better advocate for our patients to have better patient outcomes. With my job, there's always a level of uncertainty. That's just part of the job of being a critical care nurse. However, during this pandemic, that uncertainty has increased 100-fold. And it's not just nurses feeling this, it's all frontline workers, whether we're in a healthcare setting, grocery stores, driving buses, or low-wage care workers. I believe we are all feeling this too. As nurses, we show up and we give 200% to our patients. And that's what we do. Even this year, with a vicious pandemic, we muscled through for our patients, held hands when no one else could visit, and despite a real lack of support from the federal government on down to hospital administrators because of the lack of PPE, lack of transparency, and no seat at the decision-making table, we continued on. After all, it was this year that I watched in horror as nurses wore trash bags while caring for infected COVID patients. And then they died. I watched these images, and then I would get ready to go to work and take care of my patients here as best I could, with that same horror locked in place. And then it's when I got to my car and I'm driving home. The weight of the shift would come over me. And that anxiety is a constant part of my job now. As a single mother to my son, it's a constant fear. Would I now be patient zero and bring the virus home to my family? Will I die? Recently, our union at my hospital went through an incredible contract negotiation and campaign, and we were on the verge of a strike. Our battle cry was, "We are taking our hospital back." We won a major precedent-setting agreement that will not only replenish and expand our paid time off so we can recover and try to heal from this last year, but we also won language written in our contract that our employer must come to the table and bargain with us the working condition of any future declared public health emergency. We won these gains in our hospital by our internal organizing during our campaign, but it was also due to the extraordinary solidarity we received from my brothers and sisters in other unions, worker justice organizations, and hundreds of nurses who pledged solidarity to not cross a picket line if we were to go out on strike. This is what must happen in all workplaces where workers are put on front lines and expected to continue with business as usual. And what this year of the pandemic has shown us, there is no business as usual. We, the workers who do the jobs to make our communities and things run, no matter what, must be put front and center, and our voices must be heard, because we're not going back to business as usual. The accolades that we saw of us being heroes quickly fades when we confront the reality of being on the front lines of our shift during a pandemic. If nurses are indeed the heroes, alongside all of us then are essential workers, not just in our healthcare facilities, but also in our communities. Because when we talk about worker health and safety, we are also talking about public safety, how we live, how we work, the conditions we live in, the fight for clean water that we drink, the clean air we breathe are essential for all of us to live a quality life. When healthcare is profit-driven, what guarantee do we have that our health and safety are protected? And the answer is little to none. Worker organizing, the right to form unions, and passing the PRO Act are all critical for worker justice and worker safety. Today, Mother Jones's words still ring true: to mourn for the dead and fight like hell for the living. Let's shout her words loudly together now. Mourn for the dead and fight like hell for the living. Solidarity.
Thanks, Victoria. And we all stand with our nurses, just as we stand with each other today. Next, we have another group of workers that are behind the front lines, but also on the front lines. Those are the factory workers and the industrial workers. Tom Niebuhr, business agent of sheet metal, air, rail, and transportation workers of Local 565. Tom.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today, everybody, as we mourn the lives of our frontline workers that have lost their lives. As Kevin said, my name is Tom Niebuhr, and I am a business representative of Smart Local 565. We represent nearly 2,800 factory workers across the state of Wisconsin. Today we come together to pay tribute and honor our fallen sisters and brothers over the past year. We personally had over 40% of our workforce laid off in March of 2020 due to the uncertainties of the pandemic. During this time, we kept constant communication with our membership, checking in on them, making sure that they and their families were safe. Meanwhile, we were also working with our signatories to ensure that our workers would be returning to a safe workplace. Through this process and with our input, the signatories took many measures to provide a safe work environment. Jointly, we came up with the following initiatives. We installed many temp scanning stations throughout our facilities. Attendance policies were modified so the sick were not afraid of staying away from work. We staggered shift start times. We enforced social distancing whenever was possible, both on the work floors, in our break rooms, in the bathrooms. We initiated pre-shift and end-of-shift sanitizing of work areas and tools. Multi-touch surfaces like microwaves, vending machines were taken out of service to provide safety for our workers. If it were not for the efforts of our organization as well as the signatories hearing our concerns and working with us, we would not have been successful in providing these safe workplaces for our members. We were also able to arrange approved time off so that our workers could leave work and get vaccinated. Our local also worked with our signatories in an attempt to obtain and offer COVID vaccinations for those workers that wanted them. COVID-19 has opened many eyes, and this is far from over. The next challenge that we will face is the PRO Act. We believe that the PRO Act is good for all workers. The PRO Act is the largest effort to defend workers and workers' rights in many decades. The PRO Act would give workers their voice back. The PRO Act would introduce penalties on companies that violate workers' rights to organize. The PRO Act would expand collective bargaining rights for all. The PRO Act would create conditions for fair union elections. The PRO Act would give workers the safe working conditions that workers not only seek, but that they deserve. This economy does not work for everyone. Since 1978, CEO compensations have grown 940%. From 1973 to 2013, hourly wages grew 9% while productivity increased by 74%. According to the Labor Statistics Bureau, non-unionized workers are making 81% of the wages that their unionized counterparts are making. Unions are the driving force of the middle class here in America. The PRO Act would provide a much greater and more prosperous future for all workers. After more than 40 years of stagnant wage growth, it is time that all working people receive a win. Over the course of many decades, government has shifted its focus to corporations and special interests rather than the working people of the United States. Today, I would like to ask all sitting senators to support and vote yes for the PRO Act. Voting for the PRO Act is not a win for one. It is a win for all. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And I think your story kind of harkens back to last year when our office contacted some non-union corporate entities here in Madison that represent thousands of, well, they don't represent, they employ thousands of workers, many of them not employed now, and they also employ millions of workers nationwide. And every one of those employers, every single one of those corporations were not doing what they needed to do back in February and March and probably April too. Not one. We contacted them about worker safety, wasn't doing it. We talked to them about taking care of those workers so that they could go home if they had a health situation that they shouldn't be at work for. Not one was offering the types of things, the types of benefits, the wages and the sick leave that our union sisters and brothers are talking about today. And so even when the employer sits down and does the right thing, it's because they're sitting down with the union and they've understood that it's through the union and through those workers who understand what it means to be safe at the workplace at the ground level. They sit down with them and either they have to one way or the other. And that is why those workplaces are safe, through the unions and through the hard work of all the workers here today. So thanks, Tom, again. Next we have Francisca Hong, Wisconsin State Representative. Francisca.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the labor leaders here today and the speakers speaking on behalf of the workers. I am honored to be sharing space with you all. I am State Representative Francesca Hong from the 76th Assembly District. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and we are currently standing on occupied Ho-Chunk land. Today, we meet in tribute, in grief, and remembrance. No one should suffer or die simply because they go to work. So we prep for the road to workers' justice and the fight. We know that the story of Wisconsin is the story of the working class. It is the story of Teamsters, of nurses, of teachers, iron workers, students, service industry workers, and the many more that have dedicated their lives and livelihoods and too often are underappreciated. Wisconsin, this entire country, is indebted to labor. Workers' rights are as important to the fabric of our democracy as is the Constitution. And without a doubt, even without him, we know that Walkerism's damage remains in politics and in labor. Contrary to what established powers might believe, the strength of our workforce and the viability of our economy depend on the health of our unions. And to that health, we must all recommit to expanding this base. Our viability as labor and as labor supporters depends on being a strong, multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-generational union. As a small business owner myself, it is my duty to empower workers and make unions accessible to them and to fight anti-blackness. We also know we can do this better when we reinstate collective bargaining for all workers. Myself and other electeds must hold ourselves accountable and do the work to fight for better wages, working conditions, and diversity in all workplaces. Let's ensure that Wisconsin remains a leader in worker protections and benefits. Today, this is a movement moment. Where we stand is not where we hope to end up, but it is part of a longer journey that seeks justice and equity for all. And I hope that we all collectively continue to fight even harder and truly champion workers' rights. Again, I am honored to be in this fight with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Hong, and thanks for your activism, your advocacy, and we look forward to working with you in the future. You know, all workers should not have to worry about, dangers at the workplace and not making it home to their loved ones. Through our unions, we've made our workplaces safer and our communities safer, and we want that for every worker, and that's why we do support the PRO Act. So with that said, we will now have the names of the deceased read off. These are the folks and the workers, our loved ones who never made it home. So for those who are reading off the names of the deceased, please come up.
Hello, I'm Chanel Biami. I work for Chicago Midwest Regional Joint Board. I would like to read the names of people who we lost due to work injury or illness. Jeffrey Treba, Michael Machills, Lowell Dunweg, Lolita Dotson, Charles Shepard, Miguel Sotomayor, Juan Rees, and Dale Bow. Thank you.
Jesse Buell from Local 565 Business Manager, and I'm also reading off names. Dennis Murray, Terry Shekels, Lawrence Steinberg, Jose Avila, Alex Fagnagzi, Perry Ludholtz, and Michael O'Brien. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Pablo Baxter of Local 159 of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I'll be reading off Timothy Brown, Ryan Lambert, Alfredo Plaza Rios, Edward Nicholson, Kenneth Immel, Andrew Wilson, and Arturo Gonzalez. Thank you.
Ann McNary with the Communications Workers. Valentina Skurik, Kurt Dyer, Moises Efrain Andeano Lopez, Chiquita Smith, Jose Suarez Lopez, Mary Falk, Martin Hernandez.
I'm Justin Miller with Wisconsin AFL-CIO State Fed. Fran Morales Cruz, Marlene Manning, Wayne Delzer, Darmista Kahukan, Bradley Vanhove, Christopher Shute, Juan Gonzalez.
My name is Anthony Anastasi, President of Ironworkers Local 383, but I'm here on behalf of all members of Local 383
and all the men and women that have died before us to give us this opportunity to be here today. David Grognani, James Busk, Keith Menke, Patricia Dow, Lantana Boonham, Dylan Buckman, Melvin Mario Acosta, Lavinia Pumphrey, James Gustafson, Wayne Lobel, Charles Mueller, Adam Hyman, James Fisher, Jesus Cervantes, Rosalia de Rosales, John Topping, Randy Rote, Selah Mosan El-Mathil, Wayne Rothering, Jason Craig, Jacob Baton, Jerry Smith, Robert Dye.
Thank you. I would like to add also a thank you to Chad Greenwood and the workers over at OSHA for providing us this list. It's a list of 56 people who never made it home. I'd also like to add that they don't have jurisdiction over certain workers. So I'd like to include the agricultural workers, young workers, children who are on farms. Oftentimes those names are not mentioned. Mine workers, suicides, and many, many other work-related types of deaths, including even driving to and from work. Also, we'd like to honor the workers who have succumbed to COVID, and we know there's thousands of Wisconsinites who have succumbed, and many of those due to work-related situations, and we'd like to add those workers as well. So, including those names on the list, thank you for reading off the names, and then everyone else that aren't on the list, let's have a moment of silence. Thank you again for the speakers and everyone else who attended today. Let's just remember we have to continue to honor and pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living. Thank you.